All right, so are you ready to jump into some serious economic deep diving today? Because we're going to be looking at the FOMC minutes.
From their December meeting?
Yeah, the December meeting, the one where they get to decide, about interest rates.
Yeah, whether your mortgage is going to get more expensive or a little bit less expensive.
Right, exactly. Everyone's always wondering what those Fed wizards are going to do with their little interest rate wands.
And it does have an impact on just about everything in the economy.
It really does. Okay, so let's set the stage a little bit. The Fed's been kind of gradually lowering interest rates since September.
Right.
Everyone's thinking, okay, another cut's coming in December, but how much are they going to cut?
Right. Is it 25 basis points or will they go 50?
It's like waiting for your birthday to see, how much money grandma's going to give you.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, the Fed is trying to walk this tightrope.
Oh, yeah. That's a good way to put it.
They're trying to keep the economy growing, but not let inflation get out of control.
Yeah, inflation always lurking in the shadows, trying to spoil the party. So what was the Fed seeing in the economy back in December? What was the vibe? Were they getting good news, bad news, or a mixed bag?
Well, it seems like they were seeing a pretty decent economy, like a car that's running pretty well, but maybe needs an oil change soon.
Okay, so not perfect, but not terrible either.
Right. The job market was strong, but there were hints that things might be cooling down a little bit.
Interesting. So like a little yellow engine light on the dashboard, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. And then there's inflation, which had cooled down somewhat, but was still a bit higher than the Fed would like.
Like those leftovers that have been sitting out a little too long.
Yeah, you're not sure if you should risk it.
Definitely don't want to risk that.
Yeah.
So they're looking at this picture and they're trying to decide, do we step on the gas or do we tap the brakes a little bit?
Yeah.
What do they end up doing?
They decided on a little tap on the brakes.
Okay, so playing it safe.
Yeah, they lowered the target range for the federal funds rate by 25 basis points.
Not a huge cut, but still a sign they're proceeding with caution.
Exactly. It went from 4.5% to 4.75%, down to 4.25% to 4.5%.
Now, these Fed meetings are supposed to be all serious and stuff, but was there any drama, any disagreements? Did anybody storm out or anything?
Actually, yeah, there was one dissenting vote.
Oh, there was.
Yeah, Beth Hammack voted against the rate cut.
Oh, wow. So she was like, hold on, everyone. I think we need to be a little more careful here.
Yeah, essentially she was saying, inflation isn't gone yet. Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
That's interesting. I always find those dissenting voices really fascinating. Makes you think.
Right. It shows that there are different viewpoints within the Fed.
Exactly. Not everyone's always on the same page. So why do you think her perspective is so important to pay attention to?
Well, it highlights the tension within the Fed. There are some who are more concerned about inflation and want to move more cautiously.
So she's like the designated driver, making sure everyone gets home safe, even if it means ending the party a little early.
Yeah, you could say that. And it's a valid concern.
So we've got this economic puzzle with all these pieces: inflation, interest rates, the job market, and even a bit of internal debate. What's the main takeaway from all of this? What message is the Fed sending?
I think they're sending a message of caution. They're being very careful. They're not panicking about inflation, but they're also not celebrating victory.
Right. It's like they're tiptoeing through a minefield.
Exactly. They're trying to avoid setting off any explosions.
Tiptoeing through a minefield.
Yeah.
I love that visual.
Wow.
Okay, so they're tapping the brakes, they're listening to different viewpoints, and they're not making any sudden moves. Now, there's this other thing. They do something about shrinking their balance sheet. Can you explain that to me in a way that my brain can actually handle?
Sure. So imagine the Fed has this giant piggy bank.
Okay, I like piggy banks.
During the pandemic, they stuffed that piggy bank full of bonds and other assets to help keep the economy afloat.
So they were on a bit of a spending spree to help everyone out.
You could say that. But now that the economy's doing better, they're starting to slowly empty that piggy bank. They're selling off some of those assets, which removes money from the economy.
So it's kind of like tightening your belt after a big holiday feast.
Exactly, right? And it has a similar effect as raising interest rates. It helps to slow things down a bit.
So rate cuts are like tapping the brakes, and shrinking the balance sheet is like easing off the gas pedal.
That's a great way to put it. Both actions are designed to cool things down without bringing the whole economy to a screeching halt.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. Now, there was also this thing in the minutes about a technical adjustment to the overnight reverse repurchase agreement facility.
The on-NRRP?
Yeah, the on-RRP. I can barely even say it, let alone understand what it means. Can you break it down for us?
So think of it like driving a car.
Yeah.
You need to make these small adjustments to the steering wheel to stay in your lane. That's kind of what the Fed did with the on-and-RP. They made a small tweak to the rate offered on this facility to make sure it was aligned with their main interest rate target.
So it's like a fine-tuning mechanism to keep everything running smoothly.
Exactly. It's a technical detail, but it shows that they're paying attention to the finer points of monetary policy.
Okay, I can appreciate that even if I don't fully understand all the nuts and bolts. But why should I, the average person listening to this, care about this technical adjustment? How does it affect me?
Well, even small adjustments to these rates can affect the whole financial system. By fine-tuning this facility, the Fed is trying to make sure that the financial system is working properly, which helps keep the economy running smoothly.
So it's like making sure the pipes in your house are clear so the water flows smoothly.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
might not be glamorous, but it's important.
Right, it's all about maintaining stability.
Right. And preventing disruptions to the financial system.
Okay, that makes sense. So even though these details might seem technical, they actually can have a real impact on our lives. Now let's go back to Beth Hammock for a second. Her dissenting opinion really piqued my interest.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on her reasoning and why she felt so strongly about holding rates steady?
Well, she felt that the risks of elevated inflation outweighed the potential benefits of another rate cut.
So she was saying, hey, let's not get too comfortable just because inflation has cooled down a bit. We need to stay vigilant.
Exactly. She felt that the Fed could afford to be more patient, especially with the economy and job market still looking pretty strong.
It's like that friend who reminds you to pace yourself at a party so you don't have a massive hangover the next day.
Right, a voice of reason amidst the excitement.
Exactly. And her perspective is valuable because it forces us to consider the potential downsides of easy monetary policy too quickly. So we've got this picture of the Fed trying to steer the economy between inflation and recession, a dissenting voice urging caution, and all these technical adjustments happening behind the scenes. It's a lot to keep track of.
It definitely is. It's a complex balancing act.
That's for sure. But we're going to keep breaking it down for you. In part 2 of our Duck Dive, we'll explore how these decisions might impact you, the listener, in more concrete ways.
It's going to get really interesting.
Stay tuned, folks, because we're just getting started.
We'll be right back after a short break.
Welcome back to our deep dive. You know, we were talking about this Fed balancing act, trying to keep the economy going, but not let inflation get too crazy.
Right. It's a tough job.
It really is. But how does all this Fed stuff actually affect us, regular folks? You know, it seems like it's all happening in this, like, Wall Street bubble.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It can feel very disconnected from everyday life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it does matter somehow. So give me some examples. How does this stuff actually play out in the real world?
Well, one way is through your wallet.
Okay, that got my attention.
When the Fed raises interest rates, it's like they're adding this extra spice to everything that involves borrowing money.
Spice.
Yeah, like it makes everything a little more expensive.
Okay, I see what you mean. So suddenly that car loan or that mortgage, they all get a little pricier.
Exactly. And on the other hand, the money you've got sitting in your savings account might earn a slightly better return.
So it's a trade-off. Borrowing gets more expensive, but saving gets a little sweeter.
Yeah, you put it that way. And then there's this ripple effect on the whole economy.
Right, because everything's connected.
Exactly. The Fed's decisions can influence whether businesses are hiring, whether prices are going up at the store, and even whether you feel confident about spending money.
So they're like this puppet master pulling all these strings behind the scenes.
Kind of, yeah. They have a lot of influence, but it's not always direct or predictable.
Right, it's more like they're trying to nudge the economy in a certain direction.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of nudging the minutes, hinted at some potential political curveballs that could throw things off course.
Ooh, political curveballs. Now this sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Well, the minutes mention these placeholder assumptions, which is Fed speak for we know things could change depending on what happens in Washington.
So even though the Fed is supposed to be independent, they can't completely ignore politics.
Nope. They're trying to anticipate how political decisions might impact the economy, but it's not easy.
That's to try and predict the weather.
Right, exactly. There are just too many variables. For example, if certain trade policies are put in place, it could lead to higher prices on imported goods.
Which would then fuel inflation.
Right, exactly. So it's this constant game of trying to anticipate what's going to happen next.
Okay, so we've got the Fed juggling interest rates, shrinking their balance sheet, and keeping an eye on the political landscape. Anything else keeping them up at night?
Well, they're also a bit worried about potential financial vulnerabilities.
Vulnerabilities.
Yeah, like cracks in the foundation of the financial system.
Oh, that doesn't sound good.
They're worried that all the money they pumped into the economy during the pandemic might have created some asset bubbles.
Bubbles?
Yeah, like in the stock market, for example, where prices might be inflated.
Oh, I see. So they're worried about things getting too bubbly and then bursting.
Exactly. And if those bubbles burst, it could have a negative impact on the whole economy.
Right. It would be like a big economic hangover.
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay, so a lot of potential risks to keep an eye on. Now remember, we talked about Beth Hammock's dissenting opinion in part 1. Were there any other signs of disagreement among the Fed officials?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Even among those who voted for the rate cut, there were different levels of concern about inflation.
So it wasn't just a simple yes or no vote.
Nope. There were nuances and different perspectives even among those who agreed on the final decision.
That's actually kind of reassuring.
Yeah, it shows that they're really thinking things through and not just blindly following a script.
Right, they're having these real debates and weighing different viewpoints.
Exactly. And the fact that those debates are reflected in the minutes shows a level of transparency that I think is really important.
I agree. It allows us to peek behind the curtain and understand how they're making these decisions.
Okay, so we've talked about interest rates, the balance sheet, political risks, and even a bit of internal debate. Now I'm curious about the long game. What kind of signals are the Fed sending about the future of the economy? Are they optimistic, cautious, nervous? What's the vibe?
I'd say the vibe is watchful. They're definitely not declaring victory over inflation, and they're not rushing to make any big moves.
So they're playing it cool?
Yeah, exactly. They're signaling that they're going to be data dependent, which means they'll be adjusting their course based on how the economy performs in the coming months.
So buckle up, the ride might get a little bumpy.
Yeah, it's definitely a dynamic situation.
Okay, so no sudden movements, no wild predictions, just a steady hand on the wheel and eyes on the road ahead.
Precisely.
All right, I'm starting to get a better sense of the Fed's mindset now. But, we've talked a lot about the Fed's perspective, but I want to bring it back to our listeners.
How do all these intricate details about the Fed and monetary policy actually impact their lives? What does it all mean for the average person?
It's a crucial question, right? Because this stuff might seem distant and abstract, but it does have real-world consequences for all of us.
Exactly. So give me some concrete examples. How does the Fed's juggling act actually play out in my life?
Okay, well, let's start with housing.
Okay, everyone needs a place to live.
Right. When the Fed raises interest rates, it becomes more expensive to borrow money for a mortgage.
So that dream home might suddenly feel out of reach.
Yeah, or you might have to settle for a smaller place than you originally planned.
And if you're already a homeowner, your monthly payments could go up.
Right, which could put a strain on your budget.
Yeah, that's definitely something to consider. What about other areas of our lives? How does the Fed's influence extend beyond housing?
Well, think about big purchases like cars. Higher interest rates mean higher car loan payments.
Makes sense. And it could also affect things like getting a loan for a small business or even just covering unexpected expenses.
Exactly. It can make everything a little bit harder.
So the Fed's decisions can ripple out and affect a whole range of financial decisions we make, from big things like buying a house to everyday things like managing our credit cards.
Right. And it's not just about our personal finances either. The Fed's actions can also impact things like job creation and economic growth.
Okay, how so?
Well, if businesses are facing higher borrowing costs and a more uncertain economic outlook, they might be less likely to hire new employees.
Which could make it harder to find a job.
Right. And harder to get a promotion.
So it's all connected. It's like this big web where the Fed's actions can influence everything from the price of groceries to the availability of jobs to the cost of borrowing money.
It really is. And that's why it's so important to stay informed about what the Fed is doing and why. Even if you don't follow all the details, just understanding the broad strokes can help you make better financial decisions.
Okay, that's good advice. So we're not just helpless bystanders in all of this. We can actually do something.
Absolutely. You can start by staying informed, read articles, listen to podcasts like this one, and talk to financial advisors.
Right, knowledge is power.
Exactly. The more you learn, the more confident you'll feel about making financial decisions.
Okay, I like that. Anything else we should keep in mind?
Yeah, don't panic. Remember, the economy goes through cycles. There will be ups and downs. The key is to have a long-term perspective and make sound financial decisions that align with your goals.
That's a good reminder. So even though the future might feel uncertain, we're not powerless. We can take steps to prepare ourselves and make the best of whatever comes our way.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive, from the practical impact of interest rates to the political winds that can influence the Fed's decisions.
We have.
But there's still more to uncover. In part 3 of this episode, we're going to zoom out even further and explore some of the broader implications of the Fed's actions.
And what they might signal about the future of the economy.
Stay tuned, folks, because we're about to go even deeper. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive. We spent the last 2 parts kind of like looking under the hood of the Fed, dissecting their every move.
Right, getting into the nitty-gritty.
Exactly. But now I want to zoom out, look at the big picture. What does it all mean? What are these minutes telling us about where the economy's headed?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer, as with most things in economics, is it's complicated.
Of course it is.
But I think what we can see from these minutes is that the Fed is being very cautious. They're not making any big pronouncements or predictions.
So they're not jumping to any conclusions?
Nope. They're saying, we're going to watch the data and adjust our course as needed.
So they're like a ship captain navigating through foggy waters, constantly checking the instruments and making adjustments.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. They're being very data dependent.
Makes sense. Okay, so no bold predictions, just a steady hand on the wheel. But what about their overall goals? What are they ultimately trying to achieve with all these rate cuts and balance sheet moves?
Well, their ultimate goal is what economists call a soft landing.
A soft landing.
Yeah, it means slowing down the economy just enough to bring inflation under control, but without causing a recession.
So it's like tapping the brakes on a speeding car. Yeah. You want to slow down smoothly, not slam on the brakes and cause an accident.
Exactly, right. It's a delicate balance.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about how the Fed's actions can affect things like mortgage rates, car loans, stuff like that. But what about the people who are already struggling? The ones who are living paycheck to paycheck. How did these decisions impact them?
That's a really important point, and it's something that the Fed has to consider. There can be unintended consequences to any policy decision.
Right, there's always a trade-off.
Exactly. For example, if the Fed raises rates too aggressively, it could lead to job losses, which would hurt those who are most vulnerable.
So it's not just about numbers on a spreadsheet.
Right.
There are real people's lives at stake.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations, to bring these issues to light and to hold our policymakers accountable.
I agree. Okay, so we've got this complex mix of factors, inflation, interest rates, economic growth, and the impact on real people. It's a lot to think about. But I want to end this deep dive on a positive note. What can we as individuals do, to navigate this complex economic landscape?
Well, the good news is knowledge is power.
I like that.
The more you understand about how the economy works and how the Fed's decisions can affect you, the better prepared you'll be.
So we're not just passive bystanders in all of this. We can actually take some control.
Absolutely. You can start by staying informed, read articles, listen to podcasts, talk to financial advisors.
Right. Educate yourself.
Exactly. The more you learn, the more confident you'll feel about making financial decisions.
That's great advice. Okay, anything else we should keep in mind?
Yeah, don't panic. Remember, the economy goes through cycles. There will be good times and bad times. The key is to have a long-term perspective and to make smart financial decisions that are aligned with your goals.
That's a great reminder. So even though things might feel uncertain right now, we're not helpless. We can take steps to prepare ourselves and make the most of whatever comes our way.
Exactly.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive into the December FOMC minutes.
I agree.
We've covered a lot of ground, from interest rate decisions to economic forecasts to the impact on everyday people.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. We hope you found this episode insightful and maybe even a little bit empowering.
We hope so.
And if you want to explore further, you can always check out the full text of the minutes on the Federal Reserve's website. It's all there.
Yeah, it's a great resource.
So until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep exploring the fascinating world of economics.